Echoes of Wisdom was announced during a Nintendo Direct in June of this year, which is wild to think about, and the reveal trailer opened with a little bit of a misdirect. It sets off alarm bells immediately because we see Link running into a dungeon, and he looks just like he did in the Link's Awakening remake for the Nintendo Switch. I think myself and a lot of other people expected Nintendo to just go to Grezzo, the developer behind that remake, and just have them remake every top-down Zelda game for the Nintendo Switch. Like, why not? It seems like easy money. Games like the Oracle games, Seasons and Ages, seem like kind of obvious shoo-ins to get a remake at some point here or there. Something like Minish Cap, although it would be a huge bummer to lose out on that wonderful, wonderful Game Boy Advance pixel art, I could see a world in which they remade it in some way, shape, or form as well. But the most obvious one, and the one that this trailer kind of alluded to, was a remake of A Link to the Past. See, this version of Link is fighting a version of Ganon who looks very much like Ganon did in A Link to the Past. They are playing dark energy ball badminton back and forth with one another. It is like straight out of A Link to the Past. Now, where this reveal kind of deviates from A Link to the Past is that Link wins the fight against Ganon, but Ganon kind of chuckles to himself and drops his staff on the ground. And the staff that he's holding opens this big rift beneath both of their feet, and it starts sucking both of them in. Link, trying to save Zelda, who's been floating above in kind of a crystal, shoots one arrow at her from his bow, and that does just enough to crack the crystal right before Link gets sucked into whatever is beneath this rift. Zelda escapes and runs out of this dungeon as fast as she possibly can, narrowly avoiding getting sucked into this rift as well as it grows larger and larger and consumes just a huge portion of Hyrule and its people along with it. Zelda then walks up to the edge of a cliff overlooking Hyrule, and you can see Hyrule Castle and a bunch of other stuff in the distance, but the way the shot is framed is supposed to be very obviously reminiscent of that very famous opening shot of Breath of the Wild when Link first leaves his resurrection chamber or hyperbolic time chamber or whatever we want to call it. That moment where Link overlooks Hyrule is exactly what we're seeing here as Zelda, implying, yes, you will be playing as Zelda in this new video game. This is like 20 years too late, if we're all being honest with ourselves, but there is something really cathartic about playing as Zelda in the next game released in the series after Tears of the Kingdom. While Echoes of Wisdom's reveal kind of opens with this gleeful Link to the Past misdirect that then ends up with Zelda being the protagonist, there were a lot of people going into the hype cycle of Tears of the Kingdom expecting that to be the first game where we were playing as Zelda. See, Breath of the Wild established this whole new persona for Zelda as a character. She was beloved, obviously, before that game, but her characterization in Breath of the Wild was something completely new and unique to that game and that lineage of games. To put it simply, she was a nerd, which, I mean with love, but she was a history buff, which is totally understandable when you live in a place like Hyrule, where there is literal proof of the divine everywhere. God-touched mountains are reaching upwards towards their creators at all times. It would be wild to not be interested in the history of that place when it is so tangible. And that characterization of her endeared a lot of people to Zelda, including myself. Enough so that when the initial announcement for Tears of the Kingdom happened, before it was even called Tears of the Kingdom, it was just Untitled Breath of the Wild sequel. There were a lot of people watching that trailer with great interest, noting the fact that you couldn't see Link's face the whole time, and starting to speculate, is that Zelda? Could that be Zelda? Now, while we all know that ended up not being true in the end, I think that feeling of like, maybe this will be the one really resonated with people. Everyone really wanted it to be time. Everyone thought it should be time, but not everyone had enough faith in Nintendo that they would actually ensure that it was time for a Zelda-led Zelda game. Now that said, and this is a little bit of a sidebar, I do think there's a case to be made that Zelda is actually the lead of Tears of the Kingdom. Yes, you're playing as Link, but the person you are following the closest in the story isn't always actually the protagonist of the story. And considering what happens to Zelda, I won't say it in case, in case you haven't played Tears of the Kingdom, which would be wild if you're watching this video, but if you haven't played Tears of the Kingdom, I don't want to spoil it for you. But a lot of that game revolves around Link discovering what Zelda has already done. And she is the one who puts a lot of the actions in place for the story to actually unfold. She is the one with the most direct character arc. She is the one who goes through something for real. Yes, Link is obviously going through something because you are playing as him and you're going through a bunch of quests and ordeals, etc. But Zelda is the one who starts as one character and ends as another character. An arc. When you zoom out and look at the plot of that game, it's about Zelda, really. So anyway, after this moment where Zelda is overlooking the kingdom, she decides to go back to her castle to go meet up with the king, her dad. There she finds rather quickly that the way the rifts work is that they can swallow people up and they can spit out imposter versions of them. And this imposter version of the king and his aides decide, hey, Zelda is the one who opened up the rift. Guards come in, throw her in prison. And so Zelda's in jail in her own castle, which is wild. And it's in her cell that she meets Tri, who's basically our Navi for this journey. Tri is part of this group of beings who are entrusted with closing the rifts, but keeping them closed. But considering they're the last of their kind, seemingly, they need to team up with somebody to rescue all their companions and bring balance back to Hyrule. It's classic Zelda fare. To do so, Tri entrusts Zelda with a thing called the Tri-Rod, which is certainly a thing you can name a thing. And the Tri-Rod enables Zelda to copy what are called echoes of objects littered around Hyrule and replicate them. The first is this table that you can find in Zelda's cell, and by replicating the table over and over again, you can build a stairway which enables her to jump out of a crack in the wall on the left side of the cell. What follows this is the first of Echoes of Wisdom's many ill-advised stealth sequences. It's wild to put it right at the beginning here in the tutorial, but here we are. Basically, Zelda needs to escape prison by avoiding detection from a bunch of guards, and she does so by copying a bunch of new echoes and using them to just kind of sneak around this barracks. I don't really love the instant failure stealth sequences in Zelda games. I'm already really bad at stealth games as it stands, but this in particular, and doing it right at the beginning of the game before you fully even have wrapped your head around what it wants you to be doing, seems pretty cruel. But that said, it does do a pretty good job tutorializing all of these different echoes and how you're going to be using them in conjunction with one another or also individually. The first one you get is pretty simple. It's just a wooden crate, and the wooden crate is basically the natural second step in a staircase that starts with the table. So you have table, and then you have crate, and that just allows you to get higher. You also get a pot that you can throw, and when it shatters on the ground, it will draw whoever is around to the sound of that shattered pot. Again, you've seen this in other stealth games before, but it's kind of wild to see it in a Zelda game specifically, especially a top-down one like this, and it immediately teaches you, hey, these things can be used to not only, maneuver myself, but also influence the world and the enemies around me. Also, the pot allows you to jump into it, and you can hide in the pot, and you can also use it to hop around. So again, you're being taught there are a bunch of uses for each of these echoes as well. You put the 3 echoes that you already have to use, and you make your way through the entirety of the stealth sequence, also picking up a shrub on the way, which is your third step in this staircase that you're building. And you also get the most important echo, the one that has basically become a meme, or as close to a meme as anything from this game will probably be. It's the bed. It's the bed. The bed is the most important echo in the entire game by a huge margin. What they're trying to teach you to do here is use the bed to cross over gaps, right? So there's a gap in front of you, and if you put a bed down and a bed in front of that bed, it basically just builds a bridge that allows you to get over that gap. But the bed also is a thing that floats, which means that you can then use it to traverse lakes and rivers and things like that. And most importantly, and it's a double-edged sword, I will say, but the bed also enables you to rest in it. And when you rest in the bed, you heal. You get your hearts back if you're just sleeping in the bed. So you can put a bed down anywhere and just rest in it. And it takes a long time. I think you get a half a heart every second or two or something like that. But it is probably the most effective and best healing item in the entire game. I think that raises some questions about the economy of this game in some ways, because they still include, the ability to cut down grass and stuff and see if hearts are in there. You can still buy potions from shops. They include this new thing where you can get a bunch of ingredients and go to smoothie shops and concoct all of these different smoothies that you can then blend together to get different effects. Okay, my defense is up and it heals 10 hearts. It's very similar to a more pared down version of the cooking in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. All of that pales in comparison to just putting a bed down and sleeping in the bed. I haven't even gotten to the combat side of this, but I'll get to it, I promise. Anyway, one Impa-aided escape attempt later, and you are out in Hyrule and tasked with closing all of these rifts. At first, you're presented with one rift that you need to close. It's the one where Link was fighting Ganon in the beginning of the game that Zelda escaped from. But after that, you're presented with 2 rifts that you can do in either order. One is the region where the Zora live, and the other one is the region where the Gerudo live. I say Gerudo. I know some people say Gerudo. GIF, tomato, tomato. etc. After that, there are 3 rifts that you can close, again in any order, and then you're on to the end of the game. It feels like a flower blooming. It feels like peeling back layers of an onion and finding somehow even more onion beneath it. It is a structure similar to, and I don't know why I always attribute it to this game in particular, but God of War 2018, which you feel like is going to be this very linear, story-based, kind of Last of Us, kind of Uncharted, very PlayStation Studios thing, but unfurls into a bigger and bigger world that you can traverse over the course of its acts. I love this commitment to player freedom. I love that you can go into one dungeon and it doesn't really matter what echoes you have on you, but if you did the other dungeon first, maybe those echoes will help you with this one, and vice versa. It's wonderful. It feels very Breath of the Wild. It feels very Tears of the Kingdom. It feels like Tears of the Kingdom mechanically, obviously. I think the ecosystem feels kind of similar to something like auto build in some ways, but also Tri has the ability to bind themselves to objects. So if there's like a big boulder in your path, you can bind yourself to it and move it around, which is basically just Ultra Hand as well. But outside of mechanics, this open-endedness feels like we're following the lineage of the design tenets of games like Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. That said, the game that I could not stop thinking about while I was playing Echoes of Wisdom was A Link Between Worlds. The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds was 2013's top-down entry into the franchise for the 3DS. It was notable for a few things. On the highest level, its like main mechanic, the one that was in all the marketing, was that Link could turn into a painting on any wall and just kind of traverse the wall like a 2D plane. It would shift the orientation from a top-down Zelda game to something more akin to a 2D platformer, which was very cool and honestly was like the thing that made having a 3DS worth it. Like turning the 3D on specifically. I don't think you needed that 3D to like beat the game or whatever, but it sure did make that transition from top-down to flat platformer just look cool. But the other notable angle of A Link Between Worlds, and I think the one that is most prevalent here, is its complete open-ended structure. At the beginning of the game, you can rent any of Link's like classic items, the bow, the hook shot, etc., from this guy named Ravio who lives in your house. It's a whole thing. You should play that game if you haven't and meet Ravio, because he's a weird guy, but I like him a lot. But it allows you to explore Hyrule at your heart's content, like from the get-go. In retrospect, this was clearly telegraphing the future of the franchise. We would not have Breath of the Wild without the experimentation when it came to player agency that we saw in A Link Between Worlds. And let me just get this out of the way. I love A Link Between Worlds so much. It is constantly in my top 3 Zelda games. Like if you were to ask me what my favorite Zelda game is, I would probably pick a different one depending on my mood on each day. Twilight Princess, Breath of the Wild, A Link Between Worlds. Those 3 just like really encapsulate so much of what I love about this franchise. But my experience specifically with A Link Between Worlds is like so cherished. I have such a fondness for it. I think it's incredible. I think even removing the flattening into a 2D plane and like maneuvering along a wall a whole bit from the game, just that choice of allowing players to rent any of these classic items and use them to explore all of Hyrule was such a brilliant decision, because it suddenly changed, I think, the way that I was experiencing Hyrule, and specifically experiencing these top-down games. If you think back to most of the games pre A Link Between Worlds, what you end up with are a lot of situations where you'll be running around Hyrule and you will see that there is a piece of heart on top of a cliff or something, and that piece of heart is clearly telegraphing, hey, you'll be able to get here, but not yet, because you need the item that attaches to this specific weird thing that we're also telegraphing, whether it be the hook shot or whatever. And you just need to kind of make a mental note or write in a notebook or just hope to God that the game brings you back to that exact same place later, so you can eventually use the tools at your disposal to get it. What A Link Between Worlds decided to do was flip that entirely and say, hey, if a player is curious about how to get up there, they can follow that curiosity all the way through to a reward. They don't need that reward to be delayed by like literally 6 hours of game time. They can say, I think I would need the bow to get there, and then they could go rent the bow and then use it and then get there. Because of that loop, I spent way way more time in A Link Between Worlds doing everything that wasn't the main quest because I was so hooked on that feeling of like, I'm going to solve every single thing there is to be solved in this overworld. I love that feeling so much. Because of that, A Link Between Worlds is one of the Zelda games that I know for certain I 100% completed. I did everything there was to do in that video game. I could not put it down. And for those of you who are like, oh, okay, you like open world Zeldas, we get it. Breath of the Wild did that, Tears of the Kingdom did that. Here's the big difference between A Link Between Worlds and both of those games is that in Breath of the Wild, there are 900 Koroks. And in Tears of the Kingdom, there are 1,000 Koroks. And, I don't know, man. Metaphor ReFantazio's out. There's a new game by the Persona people. I don't need to spend that much time in Hyrule when I could be spending time in Metaphor. I'm going to do that instead, I think. A Link Between Worlds had a manageable sized Hyrule, which I think is really important to the feeling of exploration, where it never felt too daunting. It was almost like a challenge. It was like, you know, this place is big. There's a lot of stuff hidden here, but it's not so big that you can't see it all. And I really connected with that on like a really like primal level. And to bring it back to Echoes of Wisdom, the game's focus on collecting and utilizing objects you find around the world led me down that exact same path I fell down in 2013 with A Link Between Worlds. Half of the joy of Echoes of Wisdom is discovering a weird echo and then using it to circumvent an entire puzzle or get to a place you feel like you shouldn't be getting, and just feeling like a genius over and over and over and over again. Like, oh, okay, here's this treasure chest. It's surrounded by ice. I need to use some kind of fiery thing to melt all the ice so I can get to the treasure chest. No, idiot. I'm going to stack a bunch of beds on top of one another, and I'm just going to Mission Impossible 1 my way down in between all of the ice and get the chest instead. That is a thing you're going to be doing a lot, and it's going to feel great. It's going to feel great. And considering the leniency with which the game enables you to skip most of its puzzles like that, I think the quote, like, I'm cheating the system feeling is inherent to the game's design in a major way, and I think it is one of the more brilliant aspects of Echoes of Wisdom. You don't add a cloud that just floats in the air unless you want people to break the game. But also, if breaking the game is by design, then are you breaking the game at all? While past Zelda games want to make you feel like a genius exploring Hyrule by solving all of these handcrafted puzzles, Echoes of Wisdom kind of flips the script a little bit and makes the actual exploration of Hyrule the puzzle. And using your own ability to utilize the tools you have at your disposal, that's what makes you feel like a genius this time around. That said, that also extends to combat, which is where my feelings get a little bit more complicated. See, just as Zelda has the ability to copy and make use of objects around the world, she can also learn and replicate the echoes of every single non-boss enemy in the game, from little slimes to magic elemental slinging wizrobes. Every echo costs portions of Tri's power to produce, so more powerful echoes take up more of that valuable but immediately replenished resource. You could spawn a crow and then a second crow and a third crow, and if that uses up all of Tri's power, you can still spawn a fourth crow. It'll just delete that first one, so you just have an endless line of crows, basically. So combat in Echoes of Wisdom then basically boils down to, there's an enemy in front of you, I'm going to spawn as many little enemies as I possibly can to overwhelm that thing, or spawn the biggest, baddest echo I have in my arsenal and just let them kind of take care of it. In both cases, Zelda's kind of just chilling. For a big chunk of the game, specifically like the middle chunk of the game, I think when it doesn't know what echoes you have at your disposal, combat feels really loose and feels pretty detached, I think. You are just kind of like spawning a bunch of monsters in and letting them do your thing, which in some ways does speak to the fact that like Zelda is a princess, she is royalty, she would be commanding units, she wouldn't be getting as in the fray. I think there is something really interesting there. But it does mean that there are times where you can spawn, I don't know, a dark nut with a big axe, let him go to town while you spawn a bed and literally sleep while you're supposed to be in combat, quote unquote. This doesn't ruin the game for me. I don't really find this to be that much of a problem. It's more funny than it is anything else, but I do think that some people will bristle at that specifically. And alongside using echoes or literally sleeping, Zelda can also transform into Link at times. She finds Link's sword early on in the game, and it allows her to transform into what's called Sword Fighter mode, which is basically like a spectral version of Link. There's a mana bar in the top left corner that is draining very quickly, but it enables Zelda to run around with a sword and just like do classic top-down Zelda combat. Like, you just swing a sword around, you hit the enemies around you. And that allows you to get a little more in the fray, but also, whenever I used it, I really felt like I wasn't paying attention to the actual more interesting thing in the game, which was echoes. Because of that, I didn't use Sword Fighter mode pretty much at all in the overworld throughout the entirety of the video game. The only place I really committed to using Sword Fighter mode was the one place where I feel like the game wants you to, which is during boss fights. Bosses in Echoes of Wisdom are great, to be clear. I think they're all really fun. They all make use of echoes in like really creative ways, but they all also follow this like classic Legend of Zelda dungeon boss structure, which is weaken them enough to get them to show some kind of like glowing, obvious weak point, and then just wail on it. And whenever they want you to do that, the best move is always to spawn your most powerful echo that does damage, and then switch to Sword Fighter mode, //////, and then switch out of it immediately so you don't use up the entirety of the mana bar and you can save some of it for later. This is how you'll beat literally every single boss in the game. That's a very reductive way of talking about it because I think some of the mechanics within those bosses are really fun, but that is the time that I'm using Sword Fighter mode the most. Surprisingly, I think it ends up being the weakest part of the game. That said, there is one place in Echoes of Wisdom where the whole combat system really comes together in a big way, and it's called the Slumber Dojo in Kakariko Village. There are a lot of great side quests in this game. They're all super fun. There are a ton of them. Some of them can be really challenging, and the one that really, really, really got me down to my core was the Slumber Dojo. It's this list of increasingly difficult pre-made and time challenges that can run the gamut from like beat all of these enemies but without any of the echoes you've collected throughout the entire game to just like multiple increasingly difficult boss rush modes. It is a blast and asked way more of me than I was expecting given the way combat works in the rest of the game. When you're dropped into a room without any echoes at your disposal and you need to like pick up a rock and throw it at a bat to get an echo again, it's basically this miniaturized version of the gameplay loop that is really rewarding and satisfying in the early hours of the game. But also, you can't heal and you can't replenish your mana bar, which means that jumping into Sword Fighter mode is like a very deliberate choice that you need to make. Especially when you get later in the game and you're fighting a bunch of the bosses in a row and you can't replenish your mana bar, choosing when to use Sword Fighter mode is a really, really difficult decision, but it's one that you're going to need to make because the whole thing is timed. See, the Slumber Dojo at the end of the day just feels like this place where the team at Grezzo was just able to like completely cut loose and say like, we have a bunch of really fun, interesting mechanics all smashed together in this game, and we want to utilize them without any constraints. And that's really what they did here. And it makes that side quest in particular feel so rewarding and so fun to complete. And the reward that you get at the end of the Slumber Dojo is also, again, one of the most fun rewards that you get in the whole game. But it's also difficult. And I think that's worth acknowledging, is like, this is a game that kind of looks like it's made for kids. And I think kids will have a really good time with Echoes of Wisdom. Let me be perfectly clear on that. But there are things like the Slumber Dojo which will be surprisingly very challenging, and the same is true of some of the other side quests. There are also, like, weirdly enough, monster hunting side quests that you get at a certain point where one character will say, like, I heard some rumblings that there is a evil fish in the ocean over in this part of the map, if you can go check it out for us. It's cool, man. They did a really good job with the side stuff. And I should note, I did all of it. Like, the only thing I didn't do by the end of the game was find all of the pieces of heart, because I didn't really feel like I needed to, if I'm being totally honest. But all the other side stuff was just like so fun and silly and enjoyable that I just kind of had to. I just needed to see it all. And all the rewards are really great too. Like, every once in a while you'll obviously just get like rupees or ingredients for smoothies or things like that, but you can also get like entirely new outfits. Or sometimes you'll go in a cave, and at the back of the cave is an enemy that you will only see once in the whole game, and it's your one chance to get that echo for that enemy. And if you do, they'll probably be like one of the most useful echoes you have in your arsenal for the rest of the video game. Stuff like that just really encourages exploration and encourages seeking out every single nook and cranny in Hyrule. enough so that you're going to be probably obsessed the same way I was with doing exactly that. And on the whole, Echoes of Wisdom feels like a game that would be impossible to make successfully. To account for every circumstance and every echo and every dungeon, overworld puzzle, and combat encounter just like boggles the mind, I think. And it feels like it was only possible because of the commitment to letting players experiment and color outside the lines. There's this early echo that you get called the Plat Boom, which ends up being this easy way to gain a lot of height really early on in the game. And it's going to be a go-to for many, but just like the players in Breath of the Wild somehow finding ways to create like hot air balloons out of monster guts and whatever, we're just now seeing the beginning of what's possible in Echoes of Wisdom. While I have a few gripes here and there about the lack of balance in certain portions of the game, they all really just kind of melt away in the face of the like laissez-faire attitude and the openness through which everyone will find a creative solution that feels unintentional but like equally valid. In that way, Echoes of Wisdom joins Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom in achieving what every Zelda game since the first has aspired to. Shigeru Miyamoto, who is notably not involved in this game for the first time in Zelda history, has always said that The Legend of Zelda for the NES was an attempt to capture the wistful feelings he had while he was exploring forests and mountains in his youth. For those of you like me who grew up around nature, that feeling of like running into the woods and using sticks and stones and outcroppings and whatever to just invent whole worlds and stories feels as formative as like anything else kids can do. And finding a way to distill that feeling into video game form is brilliant and so difficult and something that should be rewarded. And Echoes of Wisdom really, really nails that throughout the entirety of its runtime. I think Echoes of Wisdom is yet another flag in the ground in this era of Nintendo's most storied franchises. Just like Super Mario Bros. Wonder proves that the 2D future of Mario games is as bright as it ever could be, Echoes of Wisdom proves that not every Zelda game needs to be a 3D open world action-adventure experience in the same vein of games like Skyrim or everything Ubisoft has made since Far Cry 2. Not that those games aren't spectacular. I love Breath of the Wild, I love Tears of the Kingdom, but I would be sad if we never got another top-down Zelda game, and getting one as good as Echoes of Wisdom is incredible. Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom will always loom large over the franchise in the same way that Ocarina of Time once did, but Echoes of Wisdom takes some big swings that enables it to stand shoulder to shoulder with them in some real ways and acknowledge the distant past while also shining a beacon that lights a new path forwards. It's a really good video game, and I think you should play it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye, everybody. So the review part of this video is over, and yet I'm still here. I'm sure you're wondering why that is. I had this idea a couple weeks ago. I've been working on this review for a while. Weirdly, I finished the whole game in like 3 days, wrote the script in like 2 days, captured all the footage. It was like all good to go, but I really didn't like the way I delivered the script. I actually filmed that part of the video 4 different times on 4 different days. And it just like, it wasn't working. I don't know why. I think I was just getting in my head about stuff, but anyway, around the first or second time I had done the script, I had this idea while I was recording that it'd be really fun to do like bonus stuff, like a bonus feature in some way, shape, or form. And I was thinking like, yeah, so I could like release it as like an unlisted video, like, you know, click the link in the description, you can watch some more stuff, or maybe post it later or whatever. And then I thought, wouldn't it be really funny if I just included it in the review video? Like, what if I had the bonus features literally just as part of the review itself? So I was bouncing back and forth between a bunch of different things about what I wanted to do. And there's this line in the script specifically that's like, if you ask me on any given day, I don't know which Legend of Zelda game is my favorite. And I thought, what better way to illustrate that than by doing a tier list? So I'm gonna do a tier list of all the Zelda games, and that's going to be the bonus feature for this review. If you're interested in more bonus features in other reviews, I guess let me know. This is uncharted territory, I think, for everybody. So let's give it a shot. All right, here we are on tiermaker.com. These logos are really small, so you're just going to have to trust me that I'm picking the right ones. let's go through here. So I have S through D as the tiers. Then I also added an I don't know tier because there are a couple that I just haven't played enough of to feel like I can make a really good educated decision about. But I have played most of these games. There is one in particular that I know will have people up in arms. So let's just get started, shall we? A Link Between Worlds. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put these in tiers, and then I'm going to try and reorder them as best I can, which I think is going to be the nightmare. A Link Between Worlds, for me, goes in S tier. I talked about it a lot in the video. You already know where I'm at on it. I think that game is like just incredible. I think it's one of the best Zelda games. It is really sad to me that it is completely unavailable to play now unless you buy a probably very expensive copy on the internet and put it on your 3DS. They should port that game. I'm hoping that the rumors that the next Switch have some kind of dual screen support, which I know is wild to say, but there are some rumors that, you can play the Switch to bottom screen in your lap, top screen on the TV. If that's the case and they start doing like Wii U and 3DS ports, man, I'm gonna love playing Link Between Worlds again. I got really into it actually while I was capturing footage for this video. I was like, I wanted to play it for like an hour, and I ended up playing it for like 3. Anyway, let's go. Okay, A Link to the Past. This is a great one. I played it when I was younger on the Game Boy Advance. I remember so little of it, but I remember liking it enough. I'm gonna put this might be weird and sacrilege. I'm gonna put this in C for now, and we can revisit it later. Breath of the Wild. This is going in S tier for me. I think it's amazing. And while we're at it, I'm gonna take Tears of the Kingdom, and this is maybe gonna be my first big swing of this little bit. I'm throwing it in the A tier. I like Tears of the Kingdom a lot. I like Breath of the Wild way more. Tears of the Kingdom, I think it's a little bit busier. I think it's, I called this video game, Echoes of Wisdom, a miracle. I think Tears of the Kingdom is also a miracle. If you go and like read game developers' thoughts about how they made Tears of the Kingdom, most of them are like, this is basically magic, which I think is pretty remarkable. But at the end of the day, the like kind of angrier world that's a little bit more hardcore, I think while it makes for a fun sequel to Breath of the Wild, it also takes away part of what makes Breath of the Wild so engrossing to me, which is that there's like a kind of serenity to Hyrule in that game. I think the like light piano music at Breath of the Wild is really important, and the kind of gaps between spaces, similar to in Shadow of the Colossus when you're like riding between colossi. That time traveled is like one of the most important bits of that game, according to Ueda, the developer, and Team Ico, and I just think I think you lose a lot of that in Tears of the Kingdom. I'm not saying you lose it entirely. I mean, I'm still putting it in an A tier. Like, I still think it's incredible, but you are having like a more hardcore experience, and it's asking a lot more of you, and I think that makes it a little bit more stressful. But you get a return to like dungeons, which is fun. The bosses are amazing. Obviously, the tiers, TIERS, like tiermaker.com. It's all great. But when I wrapped the story, I've never talked about this on like Into the Aether or anything, but I have some like major gripes with the way the story plays out also. Yeah, there's just some stuff about Tears of the Kingdom that feels a little bit messier than I would like it to be. But it's still great video game. I played it for, I don't even know how long, probably like 80 or 90 hours. Like, it's amazing. This is like nitpick hours. I'm going to save Echoes of Wisdom for a little bit later. Four Swords, I don't know. That's a game that I kind of refuse to play unless I'm playing it with a bunch of people. This is Four Swords Adventures, I think, as well over here. I'm going to put both of these with each other because I just don't know enough. I don't know as much as I would like to. Actually, while I'm at it, Triforce Heroes is another one that I feel like, I've played it a little bit. Like, I could just throw it in D tier if I wanted to, but I didn't have the intended experience. I never can have the intended experience ever again unless I find other people with a 3DS who also want to be playing it right now.
So that's where it's going to go for the time being. This is Link's Awakening. This is the original Link's Awakening. I'm going to kind of conflate, I guess, the way they did when they put this tier together. I'm going to kind of conflate this and the remake together. I love the remake. I had a great time with it. I'll link somewhere, maybe in the description, or I'll have a card fly out on YouTube or something. But I have a Let's Play of the entire game up on the Into the Aether YouTube account from a couple years ago. I had a really good time with it, but there are some like major issues with the way that game works in terms of progression. I had a whole bit in the video initially about the major differences between Link's Awakening and Echoes of Wisdom. That was specifically centered around like things like the trading quest in Link's Awakening. Like, damn, man, you need a guide for it. And I think if you need a guide for something, it's like you gotta knock it a little bit, I think. But still really fun. I mean, you got Chain Chomps in there, you got Goombas in there. How bad can it be, you know? B is the answer. All right. Seasons and Ages. These ones I keep trying to get into, and I can't. I'm having like a really hard time getting into them. It's why I actually call them out first when I'm talking about remakes at the top of the video. I just feel like I want these to get remade. I like them in theory, but I just have not gotten into them. I think it's just a matter of time, though. I think if you don't know this about me, I have another show, another podcast that I do called NPC with Federico Vitici and John Voorhees over at MacStories.net, and it's all about handhelds. Next portable console is what we call it. It's all about handhelds. I collect a lot of handhelds. Actually, let's see. I have one right here. I have the Miyu Mini Plus right here. Where is it? There we go. Ta-da. The Miyu Mini Plus. I have the Odin Mini, which I've talked about a lot on this channel. Yeah, I have a lot of handhelds, and I usually have one on me, and I feel like within the next like 6 to 8 months, Oracle of Seasons and Ages may be going to be a game that I check out. While I'm commuting on the subway and whatever. So anyway, I'm gonna put them tentatively in the C tier. I know that there's one that people like more than the other. One of them is like puzzle-y, and one of them is kind of more combat dungeon-y. And I'll be interested to see where I land here. But for now, I'm gonna just kind of leave it real simple at C. Phantom Hourglass is the one that I'm gonna choose next. Phantom Hourglass is this one's tough because I feel like it had great intentions. I mean, Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks both have great intentions. They want to be fun and cool and good. And I don't think they're as bad as people say they are. At least at the time that they came out. And maybe, I don't know, maybe opinion has wrapped back around on these games. I would assume not with Spirit Tracks, but I could see people coming to the defense of Phantom Hourglass. I like it a lot, but compared to most of the games that we're talking about here, I think like it would be wild to put it any higher than A Link to the Past, which actually, now that I'm looking at it, I'm going to move this up to B tier. And I'm going to have Phantom Hourglass in the D tier. It's going to be our first D tier video game. Spirit Tracks, I'm just going to put right alongside it. It is worth noting that Phantom Hourglass has a pretty okay mod that you can find on the internet that allows you to play with the D-pad instead of needing to use the touchscreen. I kind of think, this is maybe silly, I kind of think the touchscreen is like important to the feeling of that game. It doesn't feel as good using the D-pad or as good as I would like it to. But man, they took some big swings with that game. The most famously great thing in that game, or infuriating, depending on who you are and maybe how old you were when you were playing it initially, but there's that one puzzle where you need to close the DS because there's like a stamp on one screen and your map on the other screen, and you need to fold it closed to like stamp from the top screen to the bottom screen, and that is brilliant. That was like one of the smartest things that I had ever seen in a video game. I was so mad when I figured it out, but in the years since, I've only grown to appreciate like what a wild choice that was. So cool. The original Legend of Zelda, I have played more than you would think. I'm going to put this around the C tier for now. It's still cool, man. I mean, it's like totally... I would not recommend it to a lot of people unless you're very interested in like game history. I don't think there's like a super strong need to play it right now. I think like the last great time to play The Legend of Zelda was around when Breath of the Wild came out, considering how like inextricably linked those two games are. That's another thing I had in the video at one point was kind of a discussion about like, okay, so Grezzo is I didn't talk about this either. Grezzo is the company that did the Link's Awakening remake, but they also did the Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time ports for the 3DS. They also did, oh my god, what was that game called? Ever Oasis? Was that what it was called? I think it was called Ever Oasis. I'm going to look it up. I'm sorry that I'm not editing this part. Grezzo Ever Oasis? That was it. Yeah. Ever Oasis was a game for the 3DS. It was an RPG. It was the first completely original game by Grezzo, and it did not do very well at all. I checked it out. We did an episode for Patreon on Is the Aether that was like all of the 3DS games that we really liked, and that was one that I wanted to check out and see if I was into, and I unfortunately was not. But again, cool ideas in that game. Anyway, there's a world in which Grezzo is just like the Legend of Zelda remake team before Echoes of Wisdom comes out, and there's a bit in the video initially that was like just talking about this conceit that I think if you are a person who grew up with Breath of the Wild, for example, which is now 7 years old, which is unbelievable to think about, but Breath of the Wild, or 7 years old? Yeah, I guess so. It's like around 7 years old. Breath of the Wild being your first Zelda game would probably make it very hard to go back and play the NES original Legend of Zelda. I know that there are outliers. I know that there are people who are going and doing that, but I can understand why some people would not want to go do that. I think, you know, it is important to go and check out the hits and the just like go play the history of video games and kind of inform yourself on that stuff. I mean, that's one of the reasons that Into the Aether is the show that it is, because not being beholden to new video game releases allows us to dip back, because I think experiencing history informs the present, and vice versa. And all of that informs you and gives you a better awareness of what you like and what you don't like. And I will say that my experience with The Legend of Zelda for the NES was like cool, hence C for cool. But I don't know how much I would recommend it right now to people who haven't played it, unless you have a really like strong desire on the inside. I will say, you know, also just a side note, my last video was all about UFO 50, which is about like the joys of experiencing that era of video games. So like, I think people should do that, but I can understand why you wouldn't want to. Anyway, Zelda 2: The Adventures of Link is a funny one, because this is one that I see people coming around on. Like, I feel it's very interesting watching the turn, because I feel like most people, when you ask them about Adventures of Link, are like, terrible video game. But there are some people coming out of the woodwork who are like, I actually really like Adventures of Link. And I don't know if I'm on that side yet, but I also haven't played it since I was in like high school. And maybe there's a world where I go back and revisit that game and come out with a completely different opinion. But for now, I'm throwing it in the D tier. I'm sure it has some cool ideas in it. I appreciate that, like the Doki Doki Panic version of Super Mario Bros. 2 that we got, that they took a big swing and tried something totally different. I think that that's commendable in a huge way. I mean, you don't get Echoes of Wisdom without a big thought like that also. But it did not work for me, unfortunately. Sorry to Adventures of Link. Minish Cap, I mean, this is an A tier. That game is amazing. Shout out to Capcom. Capcom gets it. I mean, they did these games, which is why I would like to eventually bump them up out of the C tier. But Man, Minish Cap is so good. That currently is a game that I've been playing on the subway on my way to and from work again recently. For no reason in particular, outside of just kind of keeping my mind fresh while I've been working on this review. I'm not like reviewing that or anything, but it's just a game I've been kind of dipping into and out of again. Here is, I think the big one, I think for a lot of people, it's Wind Waker. I still have yet to finish this game, and it is a burden that weighs heavy on my soul, if I'm being totally honest. I need to do it. I have tried doing it so many times. I bought a Wii U so I could get the HD version of Wind Waker. I have it on many of my handhelds. It is a game that I would love so dearly to finish and have like a really strong feeling about. I just have not done that yet. So I'm so sorry. This is going in the I don't know tier for now. I do think it's probably a masterpiece though. I mean, obviously visually, I think it's really impressive. Everything that I've played like half of it. It's not like I haven't played any of it. I've played like half of it. I have a pretty strong feeling about it. Actually, if I played half of it, then I feel like I can judge it. For now, I'm going to put it in the A tier, and I could see at some point in my life it jumps up into the S tier. Let's talk about Twilight Princess. S tier. That's all I'm going to say about that. It's S tier. It's a great video game. Ocarina of Time. Oh, this one's actually giving me pause, because I was immediately going to throw it in S tier, but I need to think about it a little bit. I think it does go in the S tier. I think it does. I mean, there is a feeling that now I feel wild for even having needed to think about it at all. There is a feeling that Ocarina of Time evokes. I played it for the first time only a couple of years ago, all the way through on the 3DS. That again, the Grezzo port of that game is like unreal. It's so good. There is a feeling that Ocarina of Time evokes that none of the others, like literally not a single other Zelda game evokes. They all try to in some way, shape, or form. No, not all of them, but a lot of them. Like I said in the video, Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask loom large. I think, actually, I'm just going to say Ocarina. Ocarina of Time looms large over the franchise always. And I think it wasn't until Breath of the Wild that they decided to deviate a little bit and kind of break away from the Ocarina of Time spell that had been cast on the franchise, because that game was so successful and so huge and so frequently referred to as the best game of all time that, I mean, just like every game that came after it is in some way a reaction to Ocarina of Time. Majora's Mask, that game is about how daunting it is to make a sequel to play to Ocarina of Time. Like, go talk to the NPC. If you haven't played Majora's Mask in a long time, if you don't know what I'm talking about when I say that read out loud, go play Majora's Mask again, carve out the time, go talk to the NPCs, and just marvel at how many of them feel like the developers of Majora's Mask, like screaming outwards from the video game into reality, like, please help me. Making this game is so daunting that it hurts. It is a fascinating video game. And then after that, obviously, you get Wind Waker, which feels, again, like a reaction to Ocarina of Time, a very successful one, and culminating, I think, in some ways with Twilight Princess, which is like literally the echo of Ocarina of Time. I think it's a very successful one. Personally, I think Twilight Princess is incredible. I love that game to death. But I mean, you have to acknowledge how much it owes its existence to Ocarina of Time, and trying to be the sequel that I think everyone always wanted from Ocarina. And then that leads you to Skyward Sword, which is, I think, the moment when Nintendo and Aonuma and Miyamoto all realized, like, we can't keep doing this, man. I think Skyward Sword is a lot better than people give it credit for. I think that game, like artistically, is spectacular. I don't really mind the backtracking as much as people do. Where it really kind of falls apart for me, and this is a bummer, is the control scheme on the Wii. I didn't think worked as well as they wanted it to, and the new control scheme in the Switch version is, I think, even worse in some ways. I think that was a really great opportunity to make that game work in like a just straight up button, no motion controls needed format, and like they didn't do it, man. What a bummer that is that they didn't do it, because it really feels like it should have been great. I do like it more than I think all of these games, though. If I'm being totally honest, I'm actually going to put Skyward Sword in the B tier, which is maybe wild, but we'll revisit this when we're done placing stuff. That leaves Majora's Mask and Echoes of Wisdom. Majora's Mask, this is a game that I already mentioned. I think it's exceptional. I think it's another huge, amazing swing. When you're looking at the lineage of this franchise, it's funny to think about what you consider to be the tenets of Zelda, but also, at the end of the day, like, so many of these games are just huge deviations from those tenets, but they all still feel like Zelda. And Majora's Mask, I feel like, is just like the prime example of how outside the box you can get and still have a thing be Zelda. It's amazing. It's amazing that we don't have like 100 million people trying to make Majora's Mask again, but anyway, I'm going to put this is maybe shocking after I said all that. I'm going to put this in A tier. I think it is a much more interesting game to talk about than it is to play. I liked playing it a lot. That's another one that I played for the first time recently, and I really, really loved it. But I just, compared to this other stuff, I think it needs to be there. Here's what's interesting. If you had asked me this 2 weeks ago, and this is why I think recency bias is a real thing, I would have put Echoes of Wisdom in S tier, and I wouldn't have thought about it. Right now, a couple weeks later, now that I'm playing Metaphor Refantasio, I'm kind of in a place where I'm like, I think maybe Echoes of Wisdom goes in A tier, but we're gonna think about all this. We're gonna have to think about all this. Let's look at the bottom. I don't know. These are fine. Phantom Hourglass, Spirit Tracks, Adventures of Link. I'm actually fine with these in this order. I think that's totally cool. That totally makes sense to me. C tier, Ages and Seasons. Those are going to be a package deal no matter what. I feel like I need to put the original Zelda higher just by virtue of having played more of it. It is worth mentioning, again, good video games. We're talking about the Legend of Zelda franchise here. If you're in the C tier, that doesn't mean you're bad. If you're in the D tier, that doesn't mean that you're bad. When you're comparing Zelda against like literally anything else in the video game landscape, it's like, dude, it's better than most stuff, you know? All right, Link to the Past, Skyward Sword, Link's Awakening. Link to the Past is definitely the best of those three. No question. And then actually, I think that's probably fine. Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, Skyward Sword. I think there's a world in which Link to the Past bumps up a tier. Yeah. I had a fleeting thought that I move either Skyward Sword or Link's Awakening down, but I'm going to keep them where they are. And then A tier. Tears of the Kingdom, Minish Cap, Wind Waker. Okay. Let me just like gut feeling. I'm going to put Majora's Mask up top here. And then I'm going to put... Oh, Tears of the Kingdom. Here's the thing about Tears of the Kingdom. It's tough to talk about because it is inclusive of everything that makes Breath of the Wild great. It just adds so much more on top of that ends up being the problem in my eyes. And when I'm talking about one of the best games ever made in Breath of the Wild, I think it's wild to think that Tears of the Kingdom would go any lower than this spot on this list. So I think that's where it's going to go. I do think the next game for me, though, is Echoes of Wisdom. I think this has the makings of like an entirely new franchise in some ways. Like I'm glad that they didn't do this, to be clear. It's good that The Legend of Zelda starring Zelda is still called The Legend of Zelda. I think that that's great, because if they had called it The Legend of Link, like some people wanted, I think that would have only widened the gap here. Like, oh, Zelda can't be the protagonist of her own video game, etc., etc. That said, if they had changed the name or the nomenclature in some way, I think that it could have allowed them to like have a whole franchise alongside this, because like the ecosystem is so brilliant that it could really be its own complete thing. And there's so much stuff that I didn't talk about in the video because I didn't want to spoil too much. I even included more footage than I wanted to of like some of the end game stuff. But I just felt like I kind of needed to for some of the stuff that I was talking about. But like, man, the end of it, I'm not going to say what happens, but the end of the game, like the last dungeon and mechanically what's going on there, brilliant. Genius level game design. And that happens a lot in Echoes of Wisdom. And there are feelings that will start to bubble up over the course of play in Echoes of Wisdom that are just going to like blow your mind. It's amazing. It's an amazing video game. And I think it deserves to be in this spot right now. And then Minish Cap makes the most sense to me. Another top-down Zelda game, one that I tried to play and get into when I was a kid. I was really excited about it, and I got so stuck that I put it down and got frustrated and never picked it up again until way later in my life when I decided to play it again. I think I got it on the Wii U Virtual Console. Is that possible? I think that is what happened. Yeah. Minish Cap is amazing. And again, I'm playing it now, and it just looks so good. I mean, that pixel art is amazing. That's one of the miracles of the Game Boy Advance in general, is like that pixel art holds up so well, dude. It's unreal how good it is. And then Wind Waker, a game that I need to finish, but is already good enough to be in the A tier. And now is when it gets wild. Here's the thing, and this is gonna be blasphemous to some people, but we're in full, like, completely subjective, there is no such thing as objectivity realm here. Ocarina of Time is gonna stay in that fourth spot, unfortunately, for people who love Ocarina of Time and want it to be higher in this video in particular. You can go to the tier list, you can make your own. I love that game. I think it's amazing. I think I started talking about this and then didn't finish my thought, but there are feelings and there are ideas in Ocarina of Time that I think are just never recaptured again after that game. It is the one that feels the most like myth. Like every other Zelda game, I feel like is trying to capture that, like, that overarching je ne sais quoi, that overarching like mythical, literally, I'm trying not to use the word legendary, but like legendary idea. This almost like, it's almost like divine energy to that game. Everything feels allegorical, everything feels metaphorical, everything feels like you are experiencing myth, and that is so cool, and it is so, like, almost intangibly well done. It's really tough to really articulate, like, what it is, what that thing is about Ocarina of Time that makes it so spectacular. But that feeling that it evokes is so singular. I have experienced very few other pieces of media, period, that can evoke that same level of that feeling that Ocarina of Time does. Here's a weird pull. Drive My Car is a movie that makes me feel that way. All right. And now we have the 3 that I mentioned in the video: Breath of the Wild, Twilight Princess, Link Between Worlds. If you were to ask me right now, gut check, and I know this is going to be anticlimactic, but right now, gut check, Twilight Princess is number 1. It is currently October. It is fall. There is nothing more like autumnal, fall energy, hot topic, emo, Halloween, Tumblr circa 2009 than Twilight Princess. At least those are the feelings I get in September, October, November. And Twilight Princess is, I think, best in those 3 specific months if you live on the East Coast like I do and experience fall. After that, I think it's got to be Breath of the Wild. It's fun. I love doing tier lists like this because, again, they're like just completely subjective. Breath of the Wild, I think, is one of the best games ever made. Twilight Princess is definitely not, but it still gets to be number 1. And then after that, I think, is A Link Between Worlds for a lot of the reasons that I outlined in the video. But I think this is where I land on this. This is where we're at. That's my tier list for the time being. If you liked this, I guess let me know. And hey, like, comment, subscribe, baby. I'm around. I'm on. I don't do a very good job of promoting myself in these videos. I just kind of try and let the video speak for itself. But considering you are here and you're watching this and you're at the end of this tier list, which is amazing. First of all, thank you so much. Like, I can't overstate how cool it is that you are here watching. Thank you so much for that. I do not take that for granted at all. But if you're here at the end and you're watching this and you want to find me elsewhere, I'm on Threads and Blue Sky and Mastodon. Those are the 3 like X, the Everything app adjacent platforms I'm on. I'm not on X, the Everything app anymore. RIP to Twitter. I also have a blog, Wavelengths.online. It's where I do a lot of writing. I write a piece for that blog just about every day, sometimes multiple times a day, and I feel like it kind of evens out to about once a day, considering the days where I don't write anything and the days where I write multiple things. It kind of is like about once a day. So that's Wavelengths.online, and while you're there, you can find links to a bunch of other places that I exist, like Backlogged, which is a great place to keep track of games, where I keep a lot of lists, public lists of games. Letterboxd, where I post all my little movie reviews and stuff. And yeah, then podcasts, NPC, that's macstories.net/NPC, and Into the Aether, that's into the cast.online. Now I'm going to wrap up. I don't know what's next also for the channel. I don't know what reviews I want to write next. I have one game that I have review code for that I may or may not review. I'm actually not sure yet. We'll see. I haven't started it, to be clear, as of the time of this recording. So we'll see. And I have a thing that I've alluded to a couple times on the channel, but haven't really said outright what it is, and still will not. But I'll say this much: it is more of a retrospective than it is a review. It's a thing I kind of want to work into the channel here. So that's where we're at. All right. Now I'm done. I can't believe you watched all of this. Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.